Really good to see you all. Thank you for coming to the South Coast Food Policy Council quarterly meeting, and we'll get going in a moment. I'm going to share our screen for the PowerPoint. So just wait a few minutes. So a lot's been going on in this past quarter, and we'll start going through that. Liz, I'm going to go ahead and get started and people can jump in as they come in to the space.
That works. I'm watching the chat. I mean, I'm watching the people coming in. You're all good.
Thank you. Thank you. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk today. We're going to go through the South Coast Food Policy Council working group updates, the successes that we've had, and some of the next steps that we're going to go through over the next quarter. We're going to have a legislative advocacy training. There are 5 modules, but we're actually going to go through modules 1 and 2 combined. We're going to talk about our action alert and share the action alert. Today is the last day for the action alert, so we'll talk about that. We'll talk about the Eat Local Southcoast Challenge and volunteering at Frogfoot Farm and the next quarterly meeting in August 27th. All right. So what we'd like to do is take a few moments in quiet, and I'm going to invite you to read this for yourself. This is our land acknowledgement. Thank you for honoring us with this land acknowledgement. We will move forward with what we are doing today. So these are our updates in what we've done in this past quarter, and then we will talk about what is coming up. So per working group, we have 4 working groups. The first one is the policy working group. So as the members at large, we did advocacy alerts, and we sent 102 letters to legislators advocating for specific food programs and budget priorities in February and March, which is fantastic. And then also in March, 8 members of the South Coast Food Policy Council went to the State House to advocate on the Healthy Incentives Program. And the 8 members met with 12 of our 14 legislators. We had set up meetings, and we were able to meet with 12 legislators and staff about the specific issue of fully funding the Healthy Incentives Program. And then in April, the South Coast Food Policy Council sent House budget amendment letters to 10 House representatives to co-sponsor the amendments for the Healthy Incentive Program, the Farm to School Grant Program, the state SNAP funding for Massachusetts immigrants, and the local Food Policy Council grant amendments. We also set an action alert to the South Coast Food Policy Council members, and on average, 50% of the representatives co-sponsored our budget amendments in the House. And that's pretty good. We hope to, over time, we'll increase those numbers and getting more sponsorship with the food system issues at hand. Now, more recently, we had our action alert to the House and Senate budget amendments, and 29 members contacted their representatives and senators, and today's the last day. We will be talking about that a little bit later, but today's the last day for that advocacy alert for budget amendment, so we'll be sharing that a little bit later. The other successes that have happened in our other working groups, so I said we have 4. So we have the food policy working group, we have the food access working group, and we've been working in partnership with the Greater Boston Food Bank and different food pantries in our area. And the idea is that we want to increase the amount of food that's going into the food pantries. So if different food pantries were agencies of the Greater Boston Food Bank, we wanted to talk to them, especially if they're in the USDA commodities program. So we partnered with 4 different food pantries in the greater New Bedford and greater Fall River area. And working together, we put a process in place where we're able to get more USDA commodities food into the food pantries. And in 2 months, 609 additional cases of food were actually distributed into our area. So we're going to try to fine tune this process with the kind of beta testing group we've been working with in our area. And then we're going to see if there are other interested partners in concert with the Greater Boston Food Bank. So that's what we've been doing in the Food Access Working Group, in addition to the project, the Frogfoot Farm, Neighbors Feeding Neighbors, which was incubated within that working group. And we'll talk more about that later. The Education and Communication Working Group, we've been working on the Eat Local Southcoast Challenge. That is June 24 to July 27. And Liz, if you would kindly share that link with the group in the chat. We'll also talk about more of this in detail later, but we've been putting this piece together with the help of an MDAR grant. And so we appreciate that. This group is also working on the Hunger Sabbath Initiative as part of the September Hunger Action Month. And the Hunger Sabbath Initiative is basically what we want to do is invite all the faith leaders in Greater Boston, the Greater New Bedford and Greater Fall River area to go to the pulpit in September and actually talk about food insecurity from their pulpit in a preaching manner, in a sermon or a homily or whatever the faith denomination they have, either to highlight and raise the issue of food insecurity and to actually just say, we've been doing all this work, let's get more involved in that. And the reason is, last summer it became clear that there is something different happening in the food pantries. And faith groups have been a big key part of working in this area. And what we wanted to do is raise up the idea that in Bristol County alone, we've seen a 23% increase of people coming to food pantries in need of food. So we just wanted to raise this up during September Action Month in the faith communities to show there's something else going on. And we are going to provide data, statistics, stories, and sermon information for faith leaders. So this particular subcommittee has been working with faith leaders to kind of start working on this. In the capacity building working group, we are working through what is called, with a particular audit tool called the Community and Agricultural Resiliency Audit Tool. And the reason is one of our CAB members brought this particular auditing tool to our attention. In the past, we published the 2021 Southeastern Massachusetts Food System Assessment. And we had planned to do that every 5 years. But what we know is that as soon as we publish the food system assessment, the information is out of date. So what we want to do is look at this tool and invite the community into a response of looking at 101 indicators to do a kind of a self-audit to figure out where the gaps and the strengths are in the area, to actually kind of do a deeper dive to figure out maybe where we should be working. And because it's a tool that is an online tool, it'll be more of a live situation where it can be actively worked on over time. So all the working groups are going to be working on this particular tool during all the working group meetings. And we're going to start laying the foundations for some of our food work moving forward. Liz, do you want to add anything to that?
No, does anybody, that was a lot and that was rapid fire. So
Yeah,
does
so I'm gonna
anybody
stop
have
share.
any questions that they have about any of that? Okay.
Okay. All right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to the screen share. All right. So now what has happened as a result of some advocacy training? So due to the Project Bread grant called Moving the Needle, we have trained people in the community working on community advocacy. So we developed 5 modules with the help of Project Bread grant. And we are focusing on the Greater New Bedford Youth Alliance and Old Bedford Village. So within each working group meeting of the Greater New Bedford Youth Alliance, we have trained 2 modules so far within that working group of 13 people that we've trained in that working group. And we've also trained a youth group. There's a youth group that they have, and we did a HIP issue briefing, the Healthy Incentive Program briefing, and they had to do some advocacy on that as well. And there were 12 youth that we worked with and giving them a HIP issue briefing and then doing advocacy on that. We've also trained every member in all of 4 of our working groups so far with 3 chapters. We still have 2 more to train with this. And we've also had listening sessions with Old Bedford Village in which we're trying to figure out what do they want to learn more in advocacy and how we can tweak our current training to fit the needs of the community. So we've done that particular piece so far. But there's another piece in our efforts to engage the community in legislative advocacy that we want to support as well. And I encourage people to join the Citizens Legislative Seminar. It's for anybody in Massachusetts. It's a 2-day training by senators themselves at the State House and includes some pieces that are listed there. And it's just happens twice in a year, once in the spring and once in the fall. And you would just contact your local state legislator and ask them to sponsor you. And then you would go to Boston at the State House for 2 days straight and get trained up on legislative advocacy at that level by the senators themselves. So I would encourage you to do this as a way to fully more engage in the legislative process. So I'm going to stop the sharing there. Any questions about what we've done so far in our efforts to engage the community more in legislative advocacy and really advocate for people to step forward as a citizen and work at that level? Okay. All right, I'm going to continue going on. All right. Now, coming up, and what we do every year is we'll do action alerts. We do legislative action alerts. And again, this is with the funding from Project Bread. So thank you for Project Bread for that funding. And we're also doing the Eat Local Southcoast Challenge again. So we'll do this every year, and we'll share that again later, and we'll talk more about that. We're also doing the Journey of Food in the South Coast. So this is through an MDAR grant. We'd love to partner with you in the community. So if you are interested in food system education, we have developed curriculum and a PowerPoint to really talk about food in our region and what that looks like through the entire food system. So we'd love to partner with you. So just please contact us at SFPC at Mary Institute if you are interested in partnering and having education brought into your community or your organization. We also have a few other pieces now that we have Frogfoot Farm Neighbors Feeding Neighbors. We have 2 different programs, Meet the Farmer, and we have opportunities to volunteer at Frogfoot Farm. So we'll share more details later about that, but we'll be doing that all year round. So that's a new piece. And we have the Hunger Action a Month in September. That includes the new initiative, the Hunger Sabbath. So we'll be sharing more of that information in September. Every year, we also do the Food Summit, which is more of targeting our South Coast Food Policy Council membership and kind of cutting edge what is happening in the food system. And that'll be in October. And at the same time in October, we'll be doing Boogie at the Bog, which is a fundraiser for our program, Frogfoot Farm. And in advocacy, we'll be doing a candidate forum. We did one 2 years ago. We specifically look at state races in our area in the in the South Coast area. If there are contested races, we'll invite those potential legislators into the forum, and we'll ask them food system questions, and we'll have it live streamed. And people can do that, but only if they're contested races. So there are 4 different seats that are open in our area, so we'll be paying attention to that. So I'm going to stop sharing there. So those are the things that are coming up in the South Coast Food Policy Council. Any questions or any Any comments to all those pieces? Okay. All right, so the next part of the quarterly meeting is actually the legislative advocacy training. So I'm going to go up into that area. All right. So I'm just going to review what our current model is for legislative advocacy training. So again, through the efforts of Project Bread grant Moving the Needle, we have developed this training. It's 5 modules. Each one is about 30 to 40 minutes. We can expand it to everybody's needs, but this is what we've been using so far in all of our trainings. So the first one is more about stepping into your power, learning the different kinds of leverage points. Why is it critical to do legislative advocacy in a democracy? What is the difference between advocacy and lobbying? What are the restrictions on lobbying depending on your role? And then module 2 is really civic engagement and when you can take action. So we're really learning about what policy is, how the state legislature actually works, and when bills, what does a bill going through a process look like when it has a budget, when it doesn't have a budget, and what are the different times of the year you can take action depending on what's happening. So those are I combine those for today, and that's what we're going to do the training on. But further going into this, the third module is really looking at how do you build your strategy, which is identifying your allies and creating coalitions or joining coalitions, identifying who the decision makers are, and trying to figure out what actions you're going to take with those particular decision makers, what research is needed, and what is your message going forward. In module 4 is really more, there's a bunch of templates that we've developed. So we'll be sharing templates on tools to tracking bills and tracking your own actions in legislative advocacy, templates in writing letters and calling your legislators, and learning how to give testimony and why issue briefings are important and when to take action as a result of those issue briefings. And the last module is really based on how do you working with legislators themselves. What is a setting? How do you set up a meeting? What does that look like in a meeting? How should you use social media when you're working with legislators? How to use the regular media outlets when it comes to legislative advocacy? And how do you recognize your victories and celebrate your successes? But we're not going to do those modules today, just the first 2 combined, okay? So really, one of the key pieces to understanding leverage points in whether you're in an organization or you're with an organization like the South Coast Food Policy Council, there are a number of different leverage points that we may or may not have. So obviously there's money. There are numbers of people in your organization that you have to draw upon. There's knowledge and expertise. So knowledge is both data, it's testimony, it's the stories, it's all those particular pieces. Relational, some people, you have to identify who in your organization or in the community has the relationships with those legislators or decision makers. And then that's who you're going to work with sometimes to kind of make things happen. You also have to understand what position that legislator has in a particular committee or in the floor itself, or even within your own organization. Is it the executive director that should be contacting this person? Is it the chair of this person that should be contacting this legislator, and so on? And then you have to understand the political leverage. What is the governor's environment look like? What is their priorities? What is kind of over the bigger picture at the national level that's influencing the state level? So kind of understanding those different leverage points. And then when we look at force as a leverage, that's more of the idea of police force, military force, which really doesn't factor into the situation. And when we think of legislative advocacy in your organization, or when you think of it in South Coast Food Policy Council, we don't really have the money, but we do have the numbers of people. We have an incredible network of over 500 stakeholders that are in our system. But then those networks also have other networks. So you're talking about the numbers of people that we have to draw upon to create leverage with legislators or decision makers is quite big. And then the knowledge and expertise we have, we belong to a number of statewide coalitions that we can draw upon knowledge. We have our 2021 Southeastern Massachusetts Food System assessment that we can draw upon that knowledge. We have our partners that are in the weeds that we can draw upon our knowledge and expertise. We work with people that are directly impacted by the food system, whether they're on SNAP or on HIP or in the system in some way, and engage them into the advocacy as well. And then we also have the relational work. There's a lot of relationships at hand that know the different decision makers. So it's just identifying and working with those folks. So one of the key pieces was really understanding all these different leverage points and when to use them. And why should you do legislative advocacy? Well, oftentimes there's a very specific problem we've identified in our food system, and while not every problem is a policy solution, sometimes it is. And we want to just work concretely on those policy changes. This is important for you to do legislative advocacies because you want to tie the reality of your experience in with the decision makers. And doing legislative advocacy and bringing your story to the advocacy is an incredibly powerful way to reason why to do advocacy. And then it also creates and empowers civic society by creating where it checks and balances. And that's really helpful in our democracy. And that promotes democracy every time you are stepping up to the plate. Because if you're not doing the legislative advocacy, you can believe somebody else is going to be saying something against what we're doing. That's something my social work professor always put into our head, always looking at all the people that are kind of looking at all these issues. And we have to engage in that to have our voice at the table at every level. Now, there's some question about what is advocacy, and advocacy is more of that broader understanding of really doing education and promotion of a particular area that you want to be in. And there's different examples of advocacy. So whether you are meeting with a legislator and doing education only, that's advocacy. When you're only doing education, if you are asking for a specific position, that's lobbying. When you're just providing education, that's advocacy. If you're signing on to another member's organizational letter, advocacy. If you're contacting someone, advocacy. Now, as a citizen, this is really important. As a citizen using personal information, your personal laptop or your personal phone, even if you're working in an organization, if you're using your personal information, you're totally fine. Or if you don't belong to an organization, doing it is just, you're doing advocacy as a citizen. That's all you're doing. And you don't have to worry about that. So if you're conducting research and distributing information on a bill, all these pieces are the broader understanding of advocacy. But again, there's a difference between advocacy and lobbying, and we'll talk about that. Lobbying is a subset of advocacy where you're really talking about influencing government officials and asking for a position, a specific position on a bill. And the Mass General Law states, as you could read there, for the purposes of the definition, a person shall be presumed to be engaged in legislative advocacy that is simply incidental to his regular business if you are engaged not more than 25 hours more than any reporting period. A reporting period is any 6 months, any 6 months. So it's not like January to July, you can only do 25 hours. It's 25 hours across any time in the calendar year. So you have to be able to track if you're a nonprofit or in a business, you want to track your hours in that if you're not a lobbyist yourself. And you're receiving less than $2,500 during that time period. That's a really important piece to keep in mind. If it's a staff member doing advocacy, doing lobbying work, you have to track that just to make sure in case you are ever audited. And if you are doing more than this in your organization, then somebody in your organization probably should look into becoming a lobbyist for your organization. So for any nonprofit or any private business, you can do these pieces. You just need to be able to track that and make sure you're not potentially violating any conflict of interest. And that would be only something you can answer as an internal organization. So you can urge your legislators in a nonprofit to do something. You can do that. You just want to track that. If you are conducting or sharing information, you want to make sure that you're showing all sides of the issue, of any research. You want to, so when we do a candidate forum, we give them as much information. Everybody receives the same information, all of it. And you're not showing just one side of the incident, of the issue. So that's really what you want to be careful of as well. Sometimes it's really incredibly hard to know who to talk to. But I just want to make it clear that for the work of the South Coast Food Policy Council, most of our work is aimed at the Massachusetts State Legislature. So the legislature's main job is to create laws or change the existing laws and create a balanced budget. And most of the policy that we're talking about is general laws and statutes. We don't really get into the state constitutional issues or the regulations that are really about the department. The regulations are really looking at the Department of Massachusetts Agricultural Resources. They would take a bill that was passed and then put it into regulation form so it can be implemented. So it's really important to know who to talk to when you're doing advocacy. Now, you guys, this is probably very familiar to you for those of you who have seen anything around how a bill goes through the state legislature, but I just want to break it down to its simplest form and how you can actually be part of this process. So any idea you have, you can just take it to a legislator, whether it's a House representative or a state senator. Your job as ideas come from, often from the community. So you would just talk to the lawmaker. If they're on board with you, they would basically go to a legal lawyer who works on this and put it into a framework of legalese. And then that bill is placed into the clerk's office. The clerk then assigns a bill docket number. It's introduced or read onto the floor. Then it's assigned a bill number. It's then sent to a particular committee that it most is relevant to. And then at this point in the process, once a bill is given a bill number, this is actually a place for advocacy to happen. You want as many legislators as possible to co-sponsor the bill right from the get-go. So it's a 2-year cycle, and I'll go through the details later, but you do want to do a lot of the advocacy. So you'll see me, and every 2 years, I'll be doing an enormous amount of push to have, once a bill has received its number, for people to contact their legislators to co-sponsor this bill. The reason is, once it gets to a committee, the chair looks at how many co-sponsors are on the bill, and they will take it into consideration, and much more strongly, if there's a lot of co-sponsorship or sponsors or petitions is what is called, for that particular bill, the more likely the chair will take it seriously and spend some time on that particular bill. So it's really important to get a lot of co-sponsorship on both the House and the Senate side early on. So if you have a House bill, it's really important you have a Senate bill that corresponds. So they're moving through the Senate and the House at the same time. It takes a lot less time for a bill to go through if there's a mirror bill on both the House and the Senate side. So this is the time, once it's in the committee, this is the time for the public to enter into the discussion, because the incomplete and only job of any committee is to basically vet the bill. Is this a good bill? Does it make sense? Does it have a way to pay for it? Should I be saying this is good for the rest of the floor to vote on? And the only way for them to know that is if the public engages in that and says, my experience about this says this, the data says this. Because the legislators don't have time to do all the investigation on the bill. They're really relying on the public to provide them that information. And if we don't provide that, they're just going to go with whatever they see, whether it's a lobbyist engaged in that committee discussion or whatever. But the great thing about Massachusetts, everybody can submit written testimony at any time to that committee up until the time that committee actually meets to make a decision. And that written testimony is put into the formal paperwork for that particular bill. But this is also a time to register during a committee hearing to actually give testimony. And what the testimony provides is a face to the problem. And so again, you're taking the experience of the lived experience of that problem and with the solution at hand, and talking about that with data and stories. And that's a great way to get more support. So at that time, then after the committee will have to decide, is this favorable, unfavorable? We're sending it to study to die. And then they're going to have a floor debate on it. We'll do advocacy again on that particular issue to have all of our House representatives and all of our senators to co-sponsor and vote favorably for that particular bill. And then it's moved to the other side, and the same thing happens in the Senate. Once those particular pieces go through, they will then be given to the governor to sign, and the governor will do it. That's what's going to happen. But keep in mind what I have here on the screen. You need a 2/3 majority every time it goes to the floor and every time it goes to the Senate. So that's 106 votes needed for the House and 26 votes needed for the Senate, which requires statewide coalition work. So if your organization or the Southcoast Food Policy Council, all the stuff we're looking at is we're ensuring we're on a statewide coalition that we're working with, because you need to get that message across to every single legislator. And the only way to do that is to have that statewide coalition work. So that's a really key piece to the education and the work that we do in with our advocacy efforts. I'm going to stop there. That's a lot of information I'm throwing at you. Do you have any questions so far? Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to break it down to what is when a bill has appropriations or funding, what does that look like? And when a bill doesn't have appropriations or funding, what does that look like? And what are the areas of where you can enter in as an advocate, depending on how much time you have. So that's what we're going to do next. All right. So the important thing to know is that Massachusetts has about 6,000 bills in a session, and each session is 2 years, and only about 100 pass. So just one of the key things in advocacy is to be persistent and don't give up hope. Some bills pass, some die, some need to go through several cycles. And like I said, it takes about 3 sessions or 6 years when you have a large statewide coalition to get a bill through. And when it has a funding or appropriations with the bill to make that program work in that bill, oftentimes most of your advocacy is being thrown at the budget. And that's what we've been doing probably since February, is really working on the budget side of all of our advocacy in the Southcoast Food Policy Council has been towards the budget right now. And that's where we've been working. So I'm just going to talk about the timing real quick and what does this really look like. So during the fall, what happens is every year in the budget, because a budget is every year, even though the cycle is 2 years, the budget's every year. In the fall, all the departments meet. So for those of you who work in different municipal levels or at the state level, you understand what I'm talking about. You meet and you figure out your budget for your department, and then you're going to submit that to the governor. This is a good time to talk to department heads and to write to the governor to ask for support for your particular program funding. In early January, the governor proposes a budget to the legislature, and then January through April, like now, the House and the Senate Ways and Means hold the hearings and they develop their budgets. This is again a time to contact the House Ways and Means to advocate for your budget, what your ask is. In April, the House Ways and Means releases their budget, and we never get everything we want in the budget, so we're constantly doing budget amendment advocacy. So again, write your House Ways and Means and all of your legislators to co-sponsor the budget amendments to get to the advocacy. And then in May, the Senate goes through the same process. So right now, the Senate Ways and Means, this is the last day to do the advocacy action, which we'll share with you, is contacting the Senate Ways and Means and your senators to co-sponsor the budget amendments that we're pushing through. And in June, the Ways and Means will have a conference committee because the House and Senate do never have the same budget. And they will confer and they will figure out one budget to then send to the governor. So this is your last ditch effort in June to contact the governor to support your budget priorities. So that's the timing with the budget every year. That's what that looks like. Now for the non-budget items, so we're in year 2 of a 2-year cycle. So last year in January, the bills were filed. They were assigned a docket number and then a bill number, and the bills read onto the floor. It's assigned a committee. And then that was the time last year during February through March that we were actually constantly asking people, contact your legislators, ask them to co-sponsor these particular bills. Because again, you want when it arrives into the committee, you want them to see a big list of co-sponsors already onto that bill. And then from last year, from the spring through the winter, these were all the testimonies, all the hearings were happening. And so we are constantly like trying to get our written testimony in and trying to get people to step up and have time to provide oral testimony as well. So at the beginning of this year, all the committees were required by law to submit to the floor. Did your bill pass out of committee favorably, unfavorably, go to study, or is it dead? And then we'll know where things are, if that bill needs to go back through another cycle or not. And then this year, while they're doing the budget, they're simultaneously spring through summer, they're actually going through, now that those bills have been reported out favorably, they're going to go to the floor votes. So the advocacy then is going to be contact your legislators, make sure they pass those particular bills that pass favorably at a committee are now onto the floor vote. So again, we need a 2/3 majority. So this really requires a statewide effort, statewide coalitions working on this with 106 representatives and 26 senators signing on these floor votes. And then in the fall, every 2 years, the senators and representatives are running for office. So that's when we potentially, as a group, we'll potentially hold a candidate forum. So it's very hard to get hold of legislators during the fall because they're very busy trying to drum up support for their campaign. So that's what the budget cycle looks like. But realistically, the truth is, committee hearings at various times of the year requires constant vigilance and updates from your coalition, and to getting people to sign up onto everything. And the votes are taken at different times of the year, but you can attend public hearings. It's open to the public. You can also watch recordings of public hearings and gather information, and you can register ahead of time and provide updates to the hearings. And so again, this is just a brief training of what we've done and how this works. So are there any questions so far? We do this in a bigger setting. I kind of fine-tune these 2 modules to make it condensed but it's a little bit longer within the working groups and with the Greater New Bedford Youth Alliance and the Old Bedford Village. But this is just a synopsis. So if you would like if your organization would like us to come and do a training, we're happy to do that. Any comments or questions? And we will be sharing all this information on our website and send it out with through the network that we have. Okay, so I'm going to go on to the different pieces where we do have some action to take. All right. So the South Coast Food Policy Council we are a food policy council, and using the 2021 food system assessment for our area, we worked with our community advisory board and we identified different areas where there are some needs that we want to look at in policy. And together, the community advisory board and the working groups have established these priorities. So we do work on these throughout the last 2 years, and we'll keep working on these. But this is our platform, essentially. So these are the different pieces that we work on through the year. And then there's a lot to come up that we will tackle as necessary. But this is our legislative advocacy ask for right now. Liz, will you be able to share that link I sent you in Telegram for the action alert? So our action alert is asking you to contact your state senator. This is just a one-click action link. Once we send that link out, we want you to contact your legislators about the buy locals, basically funding them to the level that we would like. The buy locals in our area is the Southeastern Agricultural Partnership. They really support farming communities with, helping to do all the farmers markets in our area. They promote buying local, and they also do technical assistance for farmers in our region. And we also want to support the Massachusetts Emergency Assistance Program the MIFAP. So the funding that goes to like the Greater Boston Food Bank, so we get food from the Greater Boston Food Bank from our area. The funding that they get to buy all that food that comes into our food banks goes through this particular program. So we want to fully fund this particular program. And then the state funded SNAP benefits for Massachusetts immigrant residents. So Massachusetts immigrant residents are frozen out of the federal funding. So what we want to do is do state funding for SNAP for residents that are here legally. And so we want to support this particular bill. And then the Farm to School grants funding, we want to support this as well to the full funding measure. So I'm going to stop there and just check in. Great. Thanks, Liz, for sharing that. So in the chat, if you look, just click on that link and you can see the advocacy alert there. That's just going to go to your senator, put in your home address and that'll go to your senator. And this is the last day to send a letter. They're going to start voting on this. So this is it, this particular link. All right. Go back to this. There are other things you can do to take action. One is to register for the Eat Local Southcoast Challenge. This is a 6-week challenge where we want to invite people to try to eat within 200 miles of where you live. So once a week for 6 weeks from June 24 to July 27, you receive an email once a week with actually tips on how to eat local. We'll have recipes. We'll actually do education on the food system. So you'll get different resources with books, videos, and podcasts on the different parts of the food system, and really support our local economy by eating local. So Liz, if you would share that link as well onto the chat for the Eat Local Southcoast Challenge.
I did earlier.
Okay, fantastic. Awesome. And we will share that again, that information on our website, and we'll share it through our email listserv. So we'll be sharing more of this information. The other piece that we want to share and how you can take action, is through our Frogfoot Farm, Neighbors Feeding Neighbors. This is a farm to food relief program that we're just beginning, that was incubated from the South Coast Food Policy Council. And again, this program came out of the 2021 Food System Assessment for our area, and the Community Advisory Board and our working groups had identified that gleaning was nascent in our area. That's what the data showed. And that the food pantries in our area needed more food. So this is a program that we are working with 80 Makepeace to develop for helping out. So we are looking for volunteers to help develop some of the initial programming for it. So there's some labor that we need help with. And so Liz is going to put into the chat how you can register to volunteer to work on our Frogfoot Farm, Neighbors Feeding Neighbors. So that's another program. Thank you so much. And then any questions so far on the Eat Local Challenge or Frogfoot Farm? Okay. And then the last pieces of this. Just the tasks are, if you could please do the legislative advocacy, and we'll be sharing that information out on our social media for the we already did the legislative advocacy, but the Eat Local Southcoast Challenge, we really want to support our local economy here and build a resilient food system. And one of the great ways to do that is through the Eat Local Southcoast Challenge. Even if you can't every day eat local, that's okay. We're just asking you to look at those resources and maybe go to a farmer's market, find out where your local fisherman market is, and so on. So there's a lot of resources that we'll be sharing with you about that. So that is it. Are there questions about all these pieces? Thanks, Liz. Liz put in there how to volunteer for Frogfoot Farm in there. Does
was
this sound like, go ahead, sorry, like,
Yeah, that was a lot of information. So I just want to pause and give everybody a chance to also provide updates from your region and from your organization and use the remaining time and certainly any questions that come up. Let's hear from you guys.
go ahead, Andrea.
Hi, I just want to say thank you so much for inviting me today. And Christine, I am just really impressed with all the work you all are doing at the Marian Institute. And there's a lot going on, and it's really impressive. And it's giving me a lot of ideas on how some of the different projects or different systems perhaps we could put in place for the Cape. So I really appreciate your partnership and collaboration. So that we're not reinventing the wheel and wasting time, and maybe we can learn a lot about what you all are doing and make a better and bigger impact on the Cape. So thank you. And I don't know how you find time to sleep and do anything else, because there are so many different things going on. So I really appreciate it. And this is great, great work. I'm really
Thank you for your partnership, Andrea. And yeah, we have a team, and it takes that community advisory board and all the working groups to make all of this work. But I appreciate you, Andrea, and all the work you guys are doing.
Other questions, other updates?
I'll go. I'm
Thank
impressed with all the work that Andrea is doing on the Cape for those of us who also serve, not only Bristol County, but the Cape as well. Thank you, Andrea. I'll see you at your meeting at 2 o'clock.
And actually, Laura, it was canceled.
Oh.
I don't know if you got the email.
Oh, okay. I'm
Our,
working right now. Okay.
Yeah, our food economies expert was stuck in Denver because of airplane issues. But I will, if it's okay, share in the chat. We're doing a sustainable food system workshop with a food economies expert. So if you don't mind, is it okay if I share that with everybody? And if you're interested in joining, it's all on Zoom, and it's not today, but we'll have one for the following Tuesdays. And you can look on our website and see what they are. And they're all being recorded too. So I'm glad you brought that up, Laura, so you didn't log on.
Yes. Now I'm free at 2. Okay. I also want to mention I'm excited that I brought the challenge to the Board of Trustees meeting last week, and the principal is going to challenge the students and the staff to join.
Wow, Laura, thank you. That's fantastic news. Wow.
Hey, Liz Miller, it's nice to see you on here. You want to give everybody a shout out to who you are? I think that'd be really helpful. And I haven't ignored your email. I'm talking with Tori today from United Way to give her a heads up, and then I'll make the intro.
Thank you so much. Yeah, and thank you for letting me join today. Apologies, I've been eating and listening, so lunch is done now though. So yeah, I'll introduce myself. My name is Liz Miller. I work for an organization called Spoonfuls. You maybe have heard of us and known us as Lovin' Spoonfuls, or seen one of our trucks on the road, but we just recently rebranded, so we are Spoonfuls now. And we are a food recovery organization. So we recover food from grocery retail primarily, and some farms and some just wholesale distributors. And it's beautiful, perfectly good food that would be going to waste for one reason or another. So we recover that food and we bring it to places that can use it. And so it's, food pantries, meal programs, senior centers, veterans centers, after school programs, you name it, any kind of program serving individuals facing food insecurity. And I'm here today because we are, in addition to a rebrand, we have a new strategic plan, which includes geographic expansion within the state. And so we are exploring expansion down into your neck of the woods. It's very much, we're kind of in exploration mode, but we've been having some fantastic conversations and making some connections. And I welcome any questions or suggestions for who we should be speaking with. As Liz said, I connected with Liz and Christine earlier this week or last week. We'll be connecting with the folks over at the United Way soon, and they've made some other suggestions as well. But if any of you have any suggestions, I'd love to receive them, and I'll drop my email in the chat too, so you can connect with me after this as well.
Liz Miller, I'll be connecting you with Aaliyah Steele at Mass Emotion Fall River, who's also on this.
Great. Thank you. Yeah, actually, we sat in on Let's Talk Tuesdays this morning, and Joni said she saw you there, Aaliyah. So
I just saw someone from Spoonfuls in a previous meeting, so that might have been her.
Yep.
Yeah.
We'll talk soon, I think.
And Pam, if you're there and able to speak, it would be important for you to connect with Liz as well. Pam is the executive director at PACE, and I mentioned her to you when we met last week as well. Pam, you want to just give a quick overview of you and PACE?
Sure, thanks. Hi, Liz. Nice to meet you. So PACE is the community action agency that serves Greater New Bedford, but we have a food center. Our community food center is a grocery style pantry that operates 5 days a week, 5 days a week, 10 to 2. And we're just about to, we got a small grant to actually begin doing some targeted deliveries to elderly women in New Bedford through the ARAW, which, if that is successful, we hope to look at expanding with other grants. We also just got a Greater Boston Food Bank capacity grant to build some additional dry storage outside our building. Believe it or not, we just opened this pantry a year ago, and we need more space because we're serving more people. Our numbers have tripled. Actually, we did an analysis presentation we did a couple weeks ago, and it was like, we looked at the difference in the numbers, we were like a little bit blown away because but we didn't really realize. So yeah, we are looking to partner with whoever is interested in partnering with us, and would love to talk further about what that could look like.
Yeah, I'd love to connect and learn more. So I'll reach out.
Yeah, that'd be perfect. So thanks, Liz Wiley, for connecting us. And we also do some partnership with some of the farms, so we're really excited about kind of the where we're headed. So this would be a great addition to what we're already doing.
Vanilla, you're on here too, and it would be important for you to meet her as well.
Yes, sounds great. Thank you.
Yes.
And Joan Kilrow?
Yes, yes. I, as a volunteer and a food recipient at the PACE Food Pantry, I would like to weigh in and say what a fantastic job they are doing over there, and how I and all the other food recipients are absolutely thrilled with it seems like we have, even though there's more and more people queuing up to receive food, we seem to have more and more things offered every week. And really, you never know what's going to make somebody whoop with joy as they're going around with their little shopping cart. With me, it was the frozen cranberries a few weeks ago. Somebody else gets all excited at the pool. Having the storage for the perishable foods as well as the non-perishables, that is really, really a plus. And it's too bad that all of our food pantries can't provide the same service, because that really is a welcome addition to everybody's nutritional needs. It really helps out a lot. But like I say, as somebody there, boots on the ground, doing a fantastic job, and it is so deeply appreciated by the recipients.
I also want to, as this is our quarterly meeting, and Dale, I'm not sure if you can speak, but I think what's going on in the aquaculture sector is really important, and getting all the people on our quarterly meeting, just hearing about it, because they're not necessarily part of the CAB or capacity working group, would be really helpful. So Dale, if you can give just a quick update, because I think it's pretty critical.
Sure, I'm happy to do that. So I am Dale Levitt. I'm a oyster farmer in Fairhaven. And
Ah.
we have been in operation for, actually the farm has been there since 1987, although I've only owned it for the last 3 years. And as of January 1st, there's been a fairly dramatic change in policy by our regulatory agency, the Division of Marine Fisheries. And they are modifying their way of determining shellfish classification areas. So they've gone from a sort of a real-time biological testing standard now to one that's based on a hydrodynamic modeling of basically the wastewater treatment plant outfalls from a number of different communities. Right now, they're concentrating, or just recently, they've concentrated on the wastewater treatment plant outfall from New Bedford. And because of that modeling effort, they now have reclassified a very large expanse of waters in Buzzards Bay from open for unlimited shellfish harvesting now to what they consider conditionally approved, which means that we are subjected to closures that are based to some degree on rainfall. And we've had such a nice, wonderful rainy spring that we have been, our farm has been closed for harvesting for more than 50% of the time since January 1st. So that modeling effort has also been combined with a few other problems, one of which is this phenomenon that's referred to as combined sewer outfalls. And so they're basically the sewage collection system in the city of New Bedford is paired up with the same collection system that collects the straight runoff, the water from rainfall. And if the volume gets to be too high, then the sewage treatment plant just basically opens the gates and releases raw sewage into Buzzards Bay. And so that has also had a fairly significant impact. Right now, we're closed from that rainfall that we had a week ago. So with every one of these closures, we get automatic 7-day closure and then potential up to a 21-day closure. The last one we were subjected to, we were closed for a month. This time we have been closed for the last 2 weeks. And if all goes well, we will be open sometime this weekend if we don't get any more rain. So there's a lot of gnashing of teeth and sort of discussion going on as to how and why Division of Marine Fisheries has changed their criteria, and also what we can do to sort of modify or modulate what some of the impacts are. So early in the development of the process, but at some point we will hopefully have some success in trying to keep our oyster farms functioning. Otherwise, they're basically going to shut down the entire expanse of Buzzards Bay to shellfish harvesting. So that's my story.
It's really important to keep an eye on. I mean, I think people start to think of shellfish and aquaculture as a specialty food in some ways, and yet it's really a form of protein that's really important, and that actually got shown during highlighted during the pandemic, where oyster farmers were being paid to, for their product, and oysters and shellfish were going to food pantries. And so the idea around losing a commodity, that is really important to, in this industry, that's really important to our region is, I think, something that we should all be following and watching and supporting. And it's really like, am I right, Dale? And it's like being based on one model that hasn't even been peer reviewed.
Yes, that is correct. So though we're trying to rectify that now.
Yeah. So keep finding out more about this, and we're definitely at the South Coast Food Policy Council going to be following this closely and trying to support where we can with Dale and our aquaculture friends. So
well, thank you. I really appreciate the support that I'm getting. So hopefully we'll keep our fingers crossed that we can make this work.
yeah. Liz, I know you guys are doing some advocacy stuff too, so I think it's not going to be South Shore is going to be right around the corner, you know, if this happens. And I know Andrea's gone, but we'll be talking to her on the Cape, and you probably already have, Dale. The Cape Cod Cooperative. Yeah. Yeah. Any other updates?
I just want to acknowledge Salika. Thank you for joining us from Project Bread.
Thank you, Christine. It's a pleasure to meet you. My name is Salika. I recently joined Project Bread at the beginning of the year. So I just wanted to thank you folks for letting me crash your meeting. It's great to be able to meet the different folks and the different organizations that we partner with. I'm on the policy team, so this was right up my alley. I loved this. And I just want to thank you all again for letting me crash. It was a pleasure to be here with all of you.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, we appreciate you. Okay, I think we're good.
Yeah.
Christine?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would just like to say that I've never been involved in this meeting per se, and I found it very interesting, and I think it's amazing everything that goes on and what everybody does. And I know I'm going to be getting involved with you with the farmers market in my area, which that I think is going to be exciting.
Awesome. Thanks, Bernie. Thank you all. Thank you so much for coming today. We'll post the notes and the recording and everything for you guys. All right. Take care.
See ya.
Thanks for your support. Bye.